Representative Smith, if you could make your way to the table. Welcome to the committee. I will move that House File 2906 be referred to the Commerce, Finance, and Policy Committee. Representative Smith, I understand you have a DE1 amendment. Would you explain the amendment, please?
That is correct, Chair. In a lot of conversations in the interim with other representatives and senators, including Representative West, we've had many changes to the bill, which is why we have a full DE amendment. It's probably best to talk about it in the course of the whole bill since it is a delete-all.
All right, I move the adoption of the DE1 amendment. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. We will move to your opening statement, please. Representative Smith.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Behrman, and thank you, committee, for hearing this very, very important bill. No one in this committee I know would question the fact that mental illness is one of the defining issues in our society today. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experienced mental illness last year, and those numbers are only growing. And the horrors of mental illness are bad enough on their own to those who experience them, but the trickle-down health negative impacts are huge. Risks of cardiometabolic disease is up to 2 times higher in people with mental illness compared to the general population. People with depression have a 40% higher risk of developing cardiac disease, hypertension, stroke, diabetes, or obesity than the general population. 34.5% of U.S. adults with mental illness also have a substance use disorder. And today in this committee, we are talking about a new tool, a therapeutic psilocybin program here in Minnesota that has great potential. It will help Minnesotans who are struggling with a wide variety of mental illnesses, from substance use disorder, depression, PTSD, anxiety, chronic pain, and more. This bill meets with the recommendations the legislature received from the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force report that we received last year, and it builds on successful programs in other states like Oregon, Colorado, and New Mexico. It also builds on the USDA's designation of psilocybin as a breakthrough therapy, which of course is itself built upon decades of work from researchers and clinicians on the drug. If you have questions on the science of this, by the way, we won't be able to cover this as much as we'd like in this committee. I strongly recommend checking out the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force Committee legislative report. It is incredibly thorough. You'll be hearing from some of the committee members to testify today. It's really, really helpful. I think the easiest way to explain this bill is by talking about how a Minnesotan would have access to this treatment. The first step, assuming they are 21 years old or older, is receiving a diagnosis of a qualified medical condition for the program by a healthcare practitioner. The potential patient would then fill out a health screener and risk evaluation to make sure that it would be safe for them to take the drug and wouldn't be complicated by other medical conditions or drugs that they are taking. They would then submit an application to the Department of Health for admittance to the psilocybin program. If they are accepted, they would receive more information on the program, the drug itself, how it would be administered, as well as a consent waiver that they must sign and return to the department saying that they understand and they do consent to the treatment. Then they may pay a fee and receive a card stating their enrollment in the program for a period of 12 months. To receive a treatment, an enrollee must consume the psilocybin at a licensed facility with a licensed facilitator present during the session, although there are some exemptions in the bill for those who have trouble and have accessibility needs. The treatment would take place in 3 phases. A preparation session where the patient would come in, prepare for the treatment, again give verbal and written consent to the treatment that they understand. Second, an administrative session where the psilocybin would actually be ingested and experienced. And an integration session after that where a patient will receive psychotherapy to integrate the experience into their healing process. This 3-phase structure is drawn from the best practice in psychotherapy and other clinical trials. Much of the rulemaking will be done by the Commissioner of Health, but also that includes licensure process for both the facilitator and the facility itself. There is also an interagency agreement in the bill with the Office of Cannabis Management in 3 specific areas to help administration: oversight of the patient registries, facilitator registries, and the cultivation and testing of the drug itself, which is usually found in mushrooms. There's also some broad guidelines, knowing this is a new field of study and praxis, So in the first 3 years, there's not going to be more than 1,000 patients approved, 50 registered facilitators approved, and 3 testing facilities approved. We also asked the department reevaluate the entire program at the end of 3 years to see how it can be improved. I know it is quite a hefty amendment, and I apologize for that, but the vast majority of that is rescheduling. It is rescheduling in our state laws, psilocybin from Schedule 1 down to a Schedule 4, and when you change one of those numbers, you have to change all of those numbers, so that's why the list is so long there at the end. I know that's a lot, members, but this is a really, really important area and a lifeline to many Minnesotans. If you're not going to listen to me, please listen to the testimony you'll hear today. They're the voices that really matter here. People who are getting help that they thought they would never get. People saying like they have a new lease on life, that they thought they wouldn't make it and now they are because of these drugs. It is those stories that has kept this largely bipartisan. I'm so thankful for my co-author here, Rep. Nolan West, and Senator Mark Curran in the Senate, as well as many others. I've had great conversations with across the board here on this committee and elsewhere. Thank you for your consideration, and we'll be happy to stand for questions. And Chair, if that's okay, could we have a brief statement from Representative West?
We would be more than pleased to have a brief statement from our distinguished colleague here who is part of this bill and presenting today. So please proceed, Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that introduction. I'm very distinguished. And you can tell my experience as a legislator far outweighs that of the author of the bill because I did not come empty-handed. So, one thing I want to highlight about this bill in particular is pilot program. I think a lot of when somebody hears about this initially and thinks, hey, medicinal cannabis program, a lot of criticism of that is, oh, it's the nose under the camel's tent for legalization and whatnot. This is a pilot program. Also, the current federal commissioner of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, has been supportive of more than just psilocybin in use as treatment for depression and other things. So the federal government is looking at this right now, and they're also Republicans. And lastly, looking at the most difficult things to treat, treatment-resistant depression, to where you have people who have experienced things that most of us here couldn't possibly imagine, who simply cannot be reached. There has been a lot of work done showing how the psilocybin, among other drugs of the same category, has had tremendous effect in allowing them to actually receive therapy and break through what used to be an impenetrable wall into their psyche. In particular, this is our veterans, first responders, and others who do see horrible things for the betterment of our society. So with that.
Thank you, Representative West. We'll move to testifiers, and we have a long list of testifiers, so we will hold to a strict 2-minute length, and I will announce the first 3, Dr. Jessica Nielsen, Dr. Patty Dickman, and Miranda Milbauer, if you would make your way toward the table. When you are ready, Dr. Nielsen, if you would introduce yourself and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, esteemed members of this Health Committee. My name is Dr. Jessica Nielsen. I have a PhD in neuroscience as a tenure-track assistant professor at the University of Minnesota. I'm the principal investigator of the first clinical trial with psilocybin in Minnesota and founder and president of the Psychedelic Society of Minnesota. I was appointed by the governor and elected to serve as chairperson for the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force that was created in 2023 by the legislature and published a 200-page legislative report last year describing our recommendations to expand access to psychedelic medicines, particularly psilocybin-containing mushrooms. I'm here today testifying in support of HF 2906 to create a psilocybin therapy pilot program here in Minnesota based on one of those recommendations. While the clinical trials with psilocybin are showing extraordinary promise and outperforming currently available treatment options on the path towards FDA approval, We cannot wait for an FDA-approved pharmaceutical version of a treatment that readily exists in nature, has been used safely for thousands of years worldwide by indigenous cultures, and is already widely used out in the community, including other states like Oregon, Colorado, and New Mexico, who have legalized therapeutic access to psilocybin mushrooms. People are not well. Currently available therapies don't work for everyone, and options that are available can be cost prohibitive depending on levels of access and insurance coverage. Clinicians are frustrated about the limited tools at their disposal to help their patients heal. We need more options and tools in the toolkit. I personally know 5 people who have taken their own life over the past year. I can't help but wonder if their lives could have been saved if there were more effective options for them to access, especially when a viable alternative with psilocybin mushrooms is widely available, yet currently illegal to access. I have also personally healed from severe depression with psilocybin mushrooms after suffering multiple traumatic miscarriages in recent years. I have both the lived experience and the professional credentials to speak on the healing power of psilocybin mushrooms. We should enact HF 2906 to create a regulated, supervised access pilot program with psilocybin mushrooms to treat severe mental health conditions. Please support this legislation and help Minnesotans find their path to wellness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nielsen. Next up, Dr. Patty Dickman, and followed by Miranda Milbauer.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Patty Dickman. I'm a physician who's double board certified in psychiatry and addiction medicine. I spent the first decade of my career serving as a medical director of the Minneapolis VA Medical Center. In that capacity, I was medical director for addiction recovery services, our opioid treatment program, as well as our homeless clinic. During my time at the VA, I was fortunate to work on teams who healed thousands of veterans. And what sticks with me are the veterans who unfortunately did not get better, those with difficult to treat depression, difficult to treat trauma. And for veterans who shot a battle buddy by accident or had to shoot a mother in the face in Fallujah, our medications sometimes just are not enough. And our best evidence-based therapies are not enough. And despite the efforts of my very talented colleagues, sometimes our options just are insufficient, and it really breaks our hearts as clinicians. I truly see psilocybin as a evidence-based treatment that can help prevent suicide, that can help prevent overdose deaths, that can keep families together, and that can support employment. As an addiction psychiatrist, I have not once in my career seen anyone with an addiction to psilocybin. I consider it to be very low abuse potential, very low dependence potential. The substance helps people go deeper into their feelings, and most of the time when people struggle with addiction, it's their numbing emotions. They want to avoid feelings, and this actually does the opposite. It allows people to go deeper, to process through traumas, to help feel unstuck. So I currently co-own a psychiatry practice on the edge of the U of M campus with an emphasis in working with first responders. Similarly, we owe it to our first responders, our veterans, and other community members to move forward with this pilot project. And for that reason, I'm in strong support of HF 2906. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dickman. Next up, Miranda Milbauer.
Mr. Chair, so I apologize. Could I ask that Stefan Egan, he's one of my testifiers, has to leave at 2:15. Could he slip in?
Stefan Egan?
That's correct, yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair.
So Stefan Egan will be next. I'm not sure if Miranda is here, but next will be Adam Tomzik.
Wanted to make sure you got your voice. Yeah.
Please take your place, introduce yourself, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony, please.
Chair and committee, thank you for the time. My name is Stefan Egan, a selected member of the Minnesota Psychedelic Task Force, convened in 2023. I currently reside in Chisago County, Minnesota, with businesses operating in 4 other counties across the state. I say this in an effort to emphasize the potential positive impact this bill could have. Access to this molecule saved my life. I served 5 combat deployments as a counterintelligence agent with the U.S. Joint Special Operations Command. That time abroad led to both physical and mental trauma that ultimately led me down the paths of addiction and suicide attempts. Physical trauma from gunshot wounds to the chest, several IED blasts that led to 6 open brain lesions that would not heal under current VA and Army protocols. Unlike many of my brothers and sisters in arms, I was provided with the opportunity to use psilocybin in a therapeutic manner, albeit from the illicit market, but therapeutic nonetheless. Without that access, I wouldn't be here. Those brain lesions healed, brain cells reconnected, and I could function. What was labeled as complex PSD back in 2015 is now referred to as operator syndrome, a new, more defined and specific set of behavioral characteristics that made it very difficult to treat. The mental trauma can be imagined just as profound, if not more, than the physical. In order to find my way to stay alive, I had to be willing to risk my freedom, a freedom that I willingly fought for countless times. That risk, although it shouldn't be a necessary risk, allowed me to view the world through a new set of eyes. It allowed me the ability to look at the trauma through a different perspective, ultimately enabling me to be a functional and flourishing member of society. It enabled me to be a good husband, a successful business owner, and a good member of my community. In the past 4 weeks alone, I've lost 3 team members. In the last 12 months, there's been 14 total. Half of a platoon just gone. Men and women who are trained to move like the wind in the night, find solutions to the world's most complex of problems, among the nation's best and among the most highly capable in the world. Yet they stood incapable of navigating the complexities of their trauma, a trauma that ultimately led them down a very familiar path that I was fortunate to avoid. Had they had the same access, had they had the opportunity, had it been available to them, legally and regulated, they could possibly be where I am. Building industry, building communities, building families, and functioning. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up would be Adam Tomzik, followed by Eric Young. Please state your name and proceed with your testimony for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Adam Tomzik. I also served on the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force, representing patients with treatment-resistant mental health conditions. Professionally, I'm an attorney. I've spent the past 14 years working as a prosecutor in the Twin Cities, prosecuting almost exclusively violent crimes. I'm proud to speak in favor of the bipartisan House File 2906 to create a small, highly regulated trial program of psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. I personally benefited from ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which is currently legal in Minnesota. That therapy helped me quit drinking alcohol and helped me address debilitating symptoms stemming from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But ketamine does not work for all patients. A great amount of clinical research shows that psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy is effective in addressing depression, PTSD, substance use disorder, and many other conditions. This bill creates a small, trial, highly regulated program with a maximum of 1,000 patients, maximum of 50 providers. The bill contains robust safeguards to ensure the safety of patients, of the general public, and of Minnesota's children. This bill will save lives. Psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy is a safe and effective treatment to combat the main drivers of the deaths of despair that we've just heard about from the past 3 testifiers. Psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy helped me get better personally. Now I am here to help other people. On behalf of all Minnesotans who are suffering, I urge you to unlock this tool to provide help and to provide hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tomzik. Next up, Eric Young, followed by David Luce. Please state your name for the committee and proceed with your 2-minute testimony when you are ready, please.
Hello, my name is Eric Young. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Eric Young. I am a Minnesota resident, a U.S. Navy veteran, and a student at St. Catherine's University pursuing a career in medicine. I am originally from the Lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans and was directly impacted by Hurricane Katrina. Experiences like that have shaped my understanding of trauma and mental health. I support Minnesota House File 2906 because it creates a safe and regulated pathway for psilocybin therapy while allowing Minnesota to collect important data on safety and effectiveness. Many veterans and individuals struggling with PTSD, depression, and trauma are searching for new treatment options when traditional therapies have not worked. A carefully regulated pilot program allows Minnesota to move forward responsibly while expanding access to potentially life-changing mental health treatments. As someone pursuing a career in healthcare, I believe programs like this represent an important step toward addressing the mental health crisis with evidence-based approaches. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Young. Next up, David Lose, and then followed by Dr. Kim on deck. Please be seated, state your name, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is David Lose. I'm a born and raised Minnesotan and current St. Paul resident. I'm also the founding president of Frontline Bud Foundation, which is a nonprofit based here in Minnesota. We're dedicated to helping veterans like myself explore cannabis and assist them in their journey with it. I've also been a cultivator in the state's medical cannabis program for almost 4 years now. So I'm in a unique position where I really get to see firsthand every day what alternative healing can look like. I'm here to speak in support of HF 2906 for several reasons. First and foremost, I think it would be very beneficial to veterans like myself who struggle with PTSD and anxiety. Anecdotally, I can say that myself, along with several other veterans that I know both personally and in the network that we service, have reported benefits from psilocybin in a personal capacity. I also really like the language included in this bill because I believe it has good guardrails and medical program with emphasis on research, and I believe that can feasibly garner bipartisan support. It's not a recreational bill, so I don't see any immediate public safety concerns. I also like that language was included to derive the psilocybin from actual mushrooms rather than synthesized compounds as we've seen in other states. I believe that little things like that can go a long way towards restoring trust in institutions, which is at an all-time low. Thank you for allowing me to speak and hear me out today, and I very much hope that this bill passes this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lose. Dr. Kim, and then Wes Cleaver on deck, please.
Chair and the members of the committee, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak today. My name is Dr. Kim, and I'm a psychiatrist at the University of Minnesota. And I'm here today to express my support for HF 2906, which would essentially establish a regulated psilocybin therapeutic program in our state, Minnesota. In my clinical practice, which is an inpatient unit at the University of Minnesota, I work with so many individuals suffering from several mental health illnesses, including treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, and substance use disorders. Many of our patients have tried multiple medications, years of psychotherapy, and other treatments available today. Unfortunately, they've experienced very little to no relief, and this is not uncommon. A significant portion of our patients with depression do not respond adequately to currently available treatments. Over the past 2 decades, a growing body of scientific research has shown promising results for psilocybin-assisted therapy when they are given in a structured clinical setting with trained facilitators. And studies from major research institutions have demonstrated significant improvements for patients with treatment-resistant depression. This therapy, I want to be very clear, is not for casual or recreational use. It involves careful screening, preparation sessions, a supervised therapeutic experience, as well as integration afterward. In other words, it is a very structured therapeutic process designed to maximize benefit and minimize risk. HF 2906, this bill, creates exactly the kind of framework we need to do this very safely. It establishes oversight, licensing, training standards, and safeguards for both patients and the providers. A regulated program like this one is far more safer for leaving patients to seek unregulated or underground treatment options. From a medical standpoint, this therapy is not a cure-all, or it doesn't work for everyone, but for individuals who have exhausted conventional treatment options currently available, it may offer a meaningful new option. As a psychiatrist committed to advancing evidence-based care as well as reducing suffering in the mental health community, I respectfully encourage you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Next up, Wes Cleaver, followed by Dr. Rebecca Lenz. Mr. Cleaver, if you would state your name for the record, please, and proceed with your testimony when you are ready.
Okay, well,
Thank you. My name is Wes Cleaver, and very heavily in support of Bill HF 2906. My experience has been very recent. About 5 years ago, I had a stroke, which was preceded by a brain tumor, and so I had a lot of brain trauma. And the recovery from that has been long and will continue. I learned recently a hockey player by the name of Daniel Carcillo. I found through Dr. Google, because I wasn't really able to find anything through the wonderful people at the Mayo Clinic who have been great help to me. I did my own research looking for more mental health and brain trauma, and Daniel Carcillo had retired at 30 from hockey after a lot of hard hits, and had set up a psilocybin therapy program in Oregon and Colorado. So I was literally in Oregon on last Monday, a week ago, and went through the therapy session. So I'm very new to this, but the what I can only describe as mind expansion and spirituality that you experience in these sessions is incredible. Cost me $4,000. So I feel that it's something we need to bring into the state and expand on so that it's accessible to more people. And thank you for the veterans for being here, because I really feel for them. I know what it's like, not to their extent, but I do know. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. Next up, Dr. Rebecca Lenz, followed by Ross Breck. Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony for 2 minutes.
Yes. Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Dr. Rebecca Lenz. I am a dual certified psychiatric and adult geriatric nurse practitioner that has over a decade of service here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I'm also the founder of Merkaba Integrative Psychiatry, which is a small integrative psychiatry practice here in St. Paul, specializing in ketamine-assisted therapy and other alternative treatment options. I'm certified in psilocybin and psychedelic-assisted therapies through the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, and I'm currently completing supervised hours towards facilitator licensure in both Oregon and Colorado, where regulated psilocybin programs already exist. Like many clinicians in Minnesota, I have been preparing for the possibility of a safe, regulated framework for psychedelic-assisted care. In my work, I care for Minnesotans living with trauma, depression, anxiety, and treatment-resistant mental health conditions. Many of these individuals have done everything our system has asked of them. They have tried multiple medications, therapy, lifestyle changes, and wake up every day feeling like nothing is working. And increasingly, some of my patients come to me with the same quiet question: is there anything else? Right now, some of these people are seeking psilocybin on their own without screening, preparation, or integration support. That is where the greatest risk exists. I want to speak briefly from a personal experience through my legal training experiences with psilocybin-assisted therapy. I have witnessed firsthand the profound therapeutic potential these experiences can hold when approached with preparation, safety, and integration following years of domestic abuse. The magnitude of insight and healing that can emerge has been and can be truly life-changing, and those experiences have deeply shaped how I understand healing, compassion, and the human capacity for transformation. But these experiences are powerful and not appropriate for everyone. This is exactly why a regulated framework matters. This bill creates essential safeguards, health screening, informed consent, trained facilitators, and harm reduction to ensure access happens safely and responsibly. Minnesota has the opportunity to build a thoughtful, compassionate model that prioritizes patient safety and dignity. Minnesotans deserve safe, regulated pathways to healing, not silent stigma or unsafe alternatives. I urge for your support of this bill.
Thank you, Dr. Lenz, for your testimony. Next up, Ross Breck, followed by Calvin Benson, please. Good afternoon. Mr. Breck, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony when you are prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ross Brecky, and
Brecky.
I was born and raised in Minnesota. There's a very good chance I would not be sitting here in front of all of you today if it wasn't for psilocybin therapy. When I graduated high school in the mid-90s, my grandfather had already committed suicide, and I was starting to deal with severe depression myself. I began drinking a lot of alcohol and smoking a ton of tobacco. By 2011, I had 3 kids, and I was married, and was trying to keep my life together. But with all the SSRIs and antidepressants, I just wasn't finding any kind of healing whatsoever. By 2018, I was divorced, I had lost my job, and I seriously considered ending my life every single day. By early 2020, my life had spiraled out of control. Then in early 21, I had my first therapeutic psilocybin experience. I can honestly say that it saved my life. On July 6th of this year, I will be celebrating 5 years free of alcohol and tobacco. My children are so happy with me. My parents are so happy with me. I have 6 friends that have now been inspired by my healing, who have now quit drinking themselves and started changing their lives. I really appreciate every single person in this room today. Thank you so much for considering this bill. If you want to go home tonight and know that you helped change the world, you'll vote yes on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brecky. Next up, Calvin Benson, followed by Dr. John Lichtson and Brianna Matrios. Mr. Benson, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Good afternoon. My name is Calvin, and I'm here in support of House File 2906. When I was 8 years old, my father passed away. That pain led me straight into alcohol and hard drugs by the time I was 17. I was lost until one desperate night at 21, while searching for the next fix, I accidentally found psilocybin mushrooms. That single experience cracked something open in me. I began quitting the hardest drugs one by one: methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, and then pills. At 27, I went to a retreat, took psilocybin again, and came home to put down alcohol cold turkey. Today I'm 33, 6 years sober, and free of addiction. I'm a functioning, contributing member of society, and I owe that entirely to my support system and to psilocybin. Johns Hopkins University studies confirm what I lived. In a controlled setting, psilocybin can dramatically reduce addiction and depression. I stand before you as living proof that this medicine works. But right now, it's only available to those who can afford expensive retreats or travel far, far away. If we make psilocybin therapy legal, local, and affordable, we can give thousands of people the same second chance that I received. Your leadership on this issue could end years of suffering for countless families just like mine. Please support these policies that open these healing pathways. One decision from you could save more lives than you'll ever know. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Benson. Dr. Lichtson, followed by Brianna Matrios. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you. Chair and members of the committee, my name is John Lichtson. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist. My chief expertise is in the treatment of PTSD and trauma-related disorders. I worked on the Minneapolis VA's PTSD treatment team for 9 years and served as the team's medical director. I continue to practice outpatient psychiatry in the community with a specialty focus on trauma and addiction. I'm here today to voice my support for the bill HF 2906. Psilocybin and psilocybin-assisted therapy have shown enormous potential for PTSD healing. This is a uniquely bright light in a field of care where meds are more often than not inadequate, the therapy often excruciating with a high dropout rate, and the suicide rate tragically and unacceptably high. Rarely does a week go by without one of my patients inquiring about psilocybin. Individually, they represent a very diverse group of Minnesotans, urban and rural, young and old, first responders, veterans, and people of all political affiliations and beliefs. What they reliably share is a real interest and cautious hope that psilocybin can be a real tool for healing. The expert guidance established by the Psychedelic Task Force is thorough, thoughtful, and completely in line with the current medical consensus. Accompanied by this bill, we have an actionable framework to begin assessing the potential benefits of psilocybin for Minnesotans in need. What we do not have is the benefit of time. Please support this bill. It is rooted in solid evidence and true human compassion and has enormous potential to save lives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Lichtson. Next up, Brianna Matrios, followed by Maggie Kirkwood. These are the last two testifiers. Then we are going to have discussion. There have been two people on the committee who have asked to comment. I'd like to move forward with the next bill shortly, so I'm going to hold it to two comments. Please proceed with your testimony after you introduce yourself, please, Brianna.
Thank you, Buju, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brianna Matrios, and I'm an enrolled member of a tribe here in Minnesota. I was an EMT for many years, and in addition to that, I was a volunteer firefighter for almost 7 years. Fast forward to today, I now work with a different type of trauma, working in tribal communities, helping people to understand the impacts of historical and intergenerational trauma and how it shows up in our life today. I'm here today to speak in support of the House File 2906, and I speak on behalf of myself from my own Indigenous perspective and my own healing experience that I've had with these sacred plant medicines. I've learned on this path that healing is just not individual, it's intergenerational and collective regardless of who you are. For much of my life, I watched people that I love struggle with pain, whether that's from addiction, PTSD, suicide, depression, grief and loss, and many other deep soul wounds that make everyday life a struggle. The truth is that trauma is something that touches all of us. Every one of us in this room carries experiences from our own lives and the lives of our ancestors, which shapes how we show up in this world, how we make decisions, and how we interact with one another. This bill represents an opportunity for Minnesota to move forward thoughtfully with research, regulation, and clinical oversight so that many people suffering from severe mental health challenges have access to new forms of care. Psychedelic-assisted therapy, when done responsibly with proper safeguards, have shown that the potential to help people process deep trauma, depression, and grief in ways that Western medicine cannot reach. Minnesota, just want to touch that. As Minnesota explores these sacred plant medicines, that it's essential that Indigenous voices are heard, that our sovereignty is recognized, and that our cultural knowledge is included in the conversation. Tribes should be engaged partners in shaping how these conversations move forward, ensuring that Indigenous traditions are never exploited or appropriated regardless of their origin. At its heart, this conversation is about healing for all. It's not about drugs, it's about medicine. It's not about politics. It's about sinking into the heart space just for a second, realizing that we have a chance to give Minnesotans another pathway that allows them to move toward wholeness. Miigwech Chiwal, and please support this bill. Miigwech.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matrios, for your testimony. Last testifier, Ms. Maggie Kirkwood, please. Please state your name for the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, thank you, Chair and Committee. My name is Maggie Kirkwood. I proudly live in Minnesota. I'm a mother and a business owner. I am here today as someone whose life was transformed through intentional and responsible work with psilocybin. For years, I struggled with severe depression and a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I felt stuck in painful patterns, but more than anything, I felt deeply isolated and like I had nowhere to turn. My life was spiraling, and I began experiencing thoughts that frightened me and showed how much I was truly struggling. When I began working with psilocybin intentionally and with care, something shifted. I felt a profound sense of support and safety that helped me face my pain instead of escaping it. For the first time in years, I felt grounded, connected, and capable of real healing. The shift I experienced felt immediate and profound. That relief became the foundation for deeper healing and personal responsibility. It helped me to heal my relationship with alcohol and gently access deeper emotional pain I had carried for years. I no longer live under the weight of severe depression. Neuroscience suggests these experiences can help form new patterns and thinking and behavior. And I felt that change in my own life. That shift was just the beginning of a deeper journey and healing of self-awareness. I believe in thoughtful frameworks that emphasize preparation, support, and integration. This bill establishes clear structure and safeguards so people can support in intentional and accountable ways. This bill is about public health, harm reduction, and ensuring Minnesotans who are struggling have access to safe, regulated options for care and support. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, we are going to go to the discussion of the bill. First up, Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Chair and members, for this bill. 2 years ago when we passed the task force, I just remember being so excited that I think we were leaning into what could really be life-saving at the time. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I do have a question, but first I just want to say a couple of things because one, the trauma disclosure in me just wants to name that we shared some really hard truths about people's lives. And I want to thank the testifiers for your courage to share your personal stories as we move forward in a political path to find ways to help heal. I come from a long line of veterans, and so I want to say thank you to all the veterans in the room who spoke up on your about your service and your experience. We do know that in the letters that I was reading, all the support letters, a statistic stuck out to me that I think we all know, but we just don't remind ourselves that 17 veterans a day we lose to suicide. And we have a choice here. We have a choice that we can do something to protect and serve the people who served us in some of the most traumatic ways. I also saw and read stories about cancer patients. I lost my dad to cancer and many in my family. And if you or anybody you know have experienced the pain that comes with cancer, I think we're looking for a solid solution here to help people get through that. For those of you who shared your suicide attempt stories, I'm just so glad you're here. I am so glad that you made it through that. I know that experience personally as well, and I just want to name that. I also want to name that substance use is a disorder. It's a medical condition that happens to us and our families. We just heard a bill, I don't remember last week, I get time confused here about how long insurance companies can wait on pre-auth for some of the tools and the medicines that we need to save lives. I also am living sobriety 804 days. And so I wanna tell the people here who shared their story, it does matter. It does matter to other people who are walking in sobriety to know that we are in this together and that we're fighting. So thank you to all the testifiers who were courageous in that. I think we are on the cusp of something that's really amazing. I know I've done a lot of research on Australia and Canada and some of the things that we're seeing there and their impacts on mental health. My question is around the 3-year review. It's not, and maybe I missed it in the DE, I'm just interested because some of these things, I'm not totally sure when we do reviews, we actually do a great job at the return on investment and understanding, like we heard some of the stories here, we've gotten some people out of ongoing addictions, using ongoing medications, depression medications. We get people to functioning individuals in society, taxpayers. Like, is the 3-year review looking at any of the societal impacts or return on investment in what this does to us as a society? Thank you.
Representative Gilman.
Can I answer that question, Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
Okay.
Representative.
Chair, Representative Keeler, thank you for your words, and I want to echo everything you said about our amazing testifiers today. I think you all see why we like to work in this area because we hear so many success stories of hard work from really brave individuals across the board. To your question specifically about program evaluation, for your members on the committee, it's 7.18 and through 7.20 where that program evaluation is talked about. And in this draft, it's purposely vague because we do want the commissioner to be able to be as full-rounded as it can be. To your question specifically, I mean, we know behavioral health, the cost societally is on the rise across many sectors, whether that is treatments that are offered from the state or private insurance, private practice, whether it is homelessness. I mentioned some stats in the beginning as far as how these mental illnesses and then other substance use disorder cascade to other health disorders. So it's massive. I don't have an exact number for you, but I would certainly want that to be part of the evaluation of this program as a whole.
Representative Keeler.
Thank you. I like that. I think it's good that as we're setting up reviews, we look at what that is. Last, I will say there was a testifier, didn't catch his name, that mentioned a hockey player that did work. Point of personal privilege, go Spuds. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gilman.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, representatives, for bringing forth this bill. A couple things I have questions about. When I love plant medicine. I've studied plant medicine for 30 years, essential oils, all kinds of different things. I've done a lot of work with plants in general, and I'm curious about this bill. A couple of things. This bill does need some work, and just the regulation pieces of it concern me. Administering it and who can administer it. So Oregon and California have this going right now. Oh, sorry, not California, Colorado, thank you. The one part of the bill, when it talks about facilitators, requiring licensed facilitators to only, in Oregon, have high school diplomas. I was just reading a little bit more information on this, with as little as 160 hours of training. So just in the state of Minnesota, like only a quarter of those hours required for massage therapy license, for example. So the lack of medical qualifications creates sometimes dangerous situations when you crack into big things like PTSD and just the trauma that we've heard about today. Mm-hmm. But I also see the value in plant medicine. I really do. Another thing is the fiscal note piece of it. I know you want this to go to Commerce. And when we talk about a state agency overseeing another aspect, we've also seen this in the state of Minnesota right now. Some of our agencies are doing a very good job overseeing a lot of things that we deal with people. But I want to see this move through in a sense of what could this look like for folks that have gone up against things that have just been very traumatic for them. So I did also come across this weekend in looking through this bill, a Johns Hopkins study in regards to Lyme disease and post-Lyme, chronic Lyme, any neurological things, and where this medicine has been very beneficial for folks that struggle with those things. And here in Minnesota, there's a lot of folks that have neurological Lyme things as well. So just want to know where is this going and fiscal note wise?
Sure.
Representative Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative Gilman, and thank you for your conversations about this before here, and I'm sure we'll continue to work on. Because I should have said in my opening, what I mean to say is this is a work in progress. I want to sit down with those of you who want to sit down and talk about this, about how it could be tighter, and get this to a place where everyone is comfortable. To your specific questions, first for the licensed facilitator. Oregon, you mentioned right now, does only have the educational requirement of high school. You would have to have a criminal background check that is cleared, a certification through a curriculum that they approve, as you mentioned, and then they do have to pass an exam. So there is several steps along the way until they get to that. We don't specify in the bill. We allow the rulemaking to be for the Commissioner of Health. So maybe that's something we could discuss of if there's something you would feel comfortable with, including I would happily sit down and talk to you about that. Currently, it is open-ended to give the Commissioner of Health the ability. As far as fiscal note, we do not have the fiscal note back, which is, of course, a massive question in this committee. Also in the Commerce Committee, the reason we are sending it there is because the Office of Cannabis Management budget is under that committee's jurisdiction. It's also helpful I'm on that committee, so I can keep tabs on when that fiscal note comes in. And, of course, what that fiscal note says is really going to dictate how this goes forward from here. It will need to make some other committee stops if it's going to be passed into law. It touches on civil and criminal liabilities, and so there would be places we would have to go. For now, we're taking it one stop at a time as we wait for that fiscal note.
Thank you.
Good. Yes, thank you. Representative Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I was going to forego the opportunity in just a time, but let me just say
Thank you for bringing this. It's an interesting discussion. Your testifiers are amazing, both professional and the individual ones. But I also want to give a shout out to one of them, my former Hennepin County colleague, Adam Tomzik. So thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your story. And with that, I will yield.
Thank you. Closing comments, Representative Smith, Representative West.
Only thing I want to say is, if this was a terrible idea, you would have seen a lot of medical professionals here to oppose it. You did not see that today, so I'd encourage members to continue the work in progress.
And in closing, I would say you saw today the stories that make this worthwhile. I mean, this is not a Rep. West or a Rep. Smith or a Senator Coran bill. This is for Stefan and Eric and David and Ross, Brianna, Maggie, and the thousands of Minnesotans that could be testifying in the future if they had access to this bill. So thank you for giving us this testimony. I look forward to working on this with you in the future.
Thank you, Representative Smith and Representative West. Renew the motion to move House File 2906 to be re-referred to the Commerce, Finance, and Policy Committee. We will also entertain the ability to bring this bill back here for a final look at the fiscal note. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
And the motion prevails. Members, we are going to...
Last bill on our agenda is House File 4577. Please come to the table with your testifiers. I will move House File 4577 before the division. You also have a delete all amendment coded DE3. I will move the amendment before the division. Representative Reimer, that is the testimony on this bill to the language in the DE3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is.
Members, I'd like the division to adopt the DE3 amendment, then move to testimony on the bill as amended. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the DE3 amendment is adopted. Representative Reimer, please begin your testimony.
Mr. Chair, Co-Chair Zhang, members of the committee, thank you for taking the time to hear House File 4577 today. This establishes a psilocybin therapeutic program for our state. Specifically, the reason it's in veterans right now is because qualifying health issues are a thing that a lot of our veterans deal with. Things like PTSD, depression, substance use disorder are all qualifying health issues in this. When we talk about psilocybin therapy, we're not talking about the psilocybin that Chair Bliss may have tried in college one time, right? This is controlled, this is professional, and this program basically establishes a framework for our state to apply this important therapeutic to veterans who might be suffering from these specific ailments. And you'll have testimony today that talks a little bit about the science and how it's evolving. My heart, and I think Representative Smith's heart in this bill, is to create a different pathway for treatment for people who are suffering from some of these ailments. And you find that specifically in our veterans community after they get back from deployment and things of that nature. And I think over time we see kind of a repetitive cycle of traditional medicine, maybe leading to addiction. And the whole goal of this bill is to create an off-ramp, to create another potential therapeutic that can be in use, that people will give testimony today, and there are numerous articles out there talking about how this has saved lives. So excited to co-present today with Representative Smith. There's been a lot of conversations back and forth to get this bill in the shape that it is in right now, and welcome any questions. So thank you.
All right, do you have, Representative Smith, did you?
Yeah, if I could say some words. Thank you, Chair Bliss. It's great to be here this morning in my normal place to the right of Representative Reimer.
Yeah.
No one in this room would doubt that mental illness is one of the defining issues in our society today. There's various stats out there, but somewhere 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. And the horrors of mental illness are not just the experience itself, but of course the trickle-down effects in all areas of life. People with depression have 40% higher risk of developing cardiac disease, hypertension, stroke, diabetes, obesity, and a wide variety of other things. 34.5% of U.S. adults with mental illness also have substance use disorder. And as members of this committee know, this is even more pressing for veterans, especially when we talk about treatment-resistant PTSD. It affects approximately 7 to 20% of veterans, depending on their service era, with higher rates up to 29% in those from Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, which is very personal to me. That's when I grew up, and a lot of classmates and friends went to serve our country at that time. Depression affects an estimated 13 to 16% of veterans. Today we're talking about therapeutic psilocybin programs here in Minnesota. It's a new tool in our toolbox to help veterans and Minnesotans in areas that previously they felt like there was no help. And treatment they had been given was not working. You'll hear amazing stories today. If you look at all in the media, you will see incredible stories. People will use terms like, I thought my life was over, or I was not functional, or I wasn't able to even hold a job. And then all of a sudden, from responsible use of this drug, able to have a new life. They use that term quite often. And so we're excited to propose this to you. If you have questions about the science of it, I would highly, highly recommend looking at the report that the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force put out in 2025. It is extremely helpful, chock full of studies that are really incredible work. There's a large amount of work to put that together, and it's for your use as we're making decisions like we are in this committee today. So thank you all so much, and happy to answer questions.
All right, we have some testifiers on the list. Jamie Coyle. And then next up is Dr. Jessica Nielsen. And please state your name and then begin your testimony. Thank you.
Jamie Croyle. Chair, members, I am here today in support of the Psychedelic Access Project. It is a Minnesota-based advocacy organization working to advance safe and equitable and fact-based evaluation and access to psychedelic-assisted therapies. We focus on policy, education, and responsible implementation. My name is Jamie, as I stated. I am a co-founder and board director of the Psychedelic Access Project. I've spent years advocating for plant medicine policy in Minnesota, and I've been trained and licensed as a natural medicine facilitator in the state of Colorado. We strongly support the intent of this bill. It creates a structured, supervised, and clinically grounded pathway for psilocybin therapy for individuals with conditions such as PTSD, depression, and substance use disorders. For this committee, that is especially relevant for veterans. Thousands of Minnesota veterans are living with PTSD, and many are not finding relief through existing treatments. This program offers a new tool that could be life-changing. We appreciate the bill's focus on safety, including medical screening, licensed facilitators, and controlled administration sessions. At the same time, we want to highlight a concern around the timeline and access. As written, the program may take up to 2 years to stand up, followed by a 3-year pilot with final recommendations due in 2031. In practice, that means if the program fills up quickly, the earliest patient could access this treatment. The access to this treatment could be as late as July of 2032. For veterans and others who are struggling today, that timeline is just not long. It can be the difference between continued suffering and access to care, or even life or death. For veterans and others who are struggling today, we encourage the inclusion of interim reporting to the legislator and flexibility to expand access if early data shows strong outcomes. This allows the state to remain cautious while also being responsive. It's a strong bill with small adjustments to timeline and scalability. Minnesota can better serve veterans and others in need. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Dr. Jessica Nielsen. Please state your name and begin your testimony.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Dr. Jessica Nielsen, Chair Bliss, and esteemed members of the House Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. My name is Dr. Jessica Nielsen. As I said, I'm testifying in support of HF 4577 to create a psilocybin therapy pilot program here in Minnesota based on one of the recommendations of the legislatively created Psychedelic Medicine Task Force. I was appointed by the governor in 2023 and elected to serve as the chair of the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force based on my extensive experience doing psychedelic clinical research here in Minnesota, where I conducted the first FDA and DEA approved psilocybin clinical trial in the state. The task force submitted our 200-page legislative report last year with recommendations that included creating a therapeutic access program with psilocybin mushrooms. The report thoroughly evaluated their long history of use by indigenous cultures worldwide, scientific evidence for their safe and effective therapeutic uses across a broad range of difficult-to-treat mental health conditions, the expansion of access in other states and countries who have legalized regulated access models to fill the gap in currently available treatment options, and policy considerations for implementation for our recommendations. People are not well. Currently available therapies don't work for everyone, and options that are available can be prohibitive depending on levels of access, insurance coverage, and availability of adequately trained therapists. Clinicians are frustrated about the limited tools at their disposal to help their patients heal. We need more options and tools in the toolkit. I personally know 6 people who have taken their own life over the past year, 2 of whom were veterans. I can't help but wonder if their lives could have been saved if there were more effective options for them to access, especially when a viable alternative with psilocybin mushrooms is widely available, yet currently illegal to access. Both the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense, the Department of War, are investing millions into helping provide access to treat the mental health fallout of combat for veterans and active duty military, recognizing that those who serve our country have bared the cost with their physical and mental health and deserve access to as many options that we can provide. The task force report thoroughly reviewed the scientific research with psilocybin and other psychedelic medicines up to the end of 2024, with more promising research and therapeutic indications being published since then. The interest in psilocybin therapy has been increasing since their prohibition in 1970, not just from those hoping to experience their healing potential, but also from the scientific and medical communities that see this as an effective alternative to the currently available treatment options that aren't effective for large numbers of people. Current indications suggest treatment-resistant depression, end-of-life distress, substance use disorders, including alcohol abuse and tobacco, and that these are better treated with psilocybin than their currently available treatments, and promising findings from ongoing studies on dozens of other health conditions, including post-traumatic stress disorder, specifically in veterans, are coming out every day. While the clinical trials with psilocybin are showing extraordinary promise and outperforming currently available treatment options on the path towards FDA approval, we cannot wait for an FDA-approved pharmaceutical version of a treatment that readily exists in nature, has been widely used safely for thousands of years worldwide by indigenous cultures, and is already widely used out in the community, including other states like Oregon, Colorado, and New Mexico, who have legalized therapeutic access to psilocybin mushrooms, with 38 other states having some type of legislation introduced to expand access to these types of therapies. I encourage you to support HF 4577. Thank you for your time and consideration of this important piece of legislation to help ease the suffering of patients and veterans in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. Ross Brecky. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Please state the proper pronunciation and begin your testimony.
Hello, my name is Ross Brecky. I'm just here to tell you that I'm not a veteran. I'm here to support one of my childhood friends who is a veteran. Me and Chris were the naughty kids in school, and in the late 90s, he joined the Marines, and he was in that for a long time. And in the early 2000s, I ran into him on the top of a mountain in California right after he'd finished his deployment and was being released. And from then on, we continued to connect with each other and chat over the years. And both of us struggled deeply with depression and alcohol and tobacco and just mental health issues. Chris continues to struggle. And we talk a lot about what happened to me in early 21 when I experienced my first psilocybin therapy. On July 6th of this year, I will celebrate 5 years free of alcohol and tobacco. And my depression symptoms are like 90% gone. I mean, I gotta have a little with this world, right? There's healing to be found in this medicine. This is not something new. This is something that humans used to have access to for thousands of years. Psilocybin has evolved in mushrooms more than once in totally different species on this planet. It's here to help us. I believe that if we can pass these laws and make the changes, we can bring healing to more of our veterans who need the healing. Every 37 seconds, we lose another one. That's a devastating, devastating thought. Think of all the families and children that have had to deal with the loss of their family members. So I'm here today to ask you to please consider passing this bill for all of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And final testifier is Mr. Kelly. Please state your name, begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair and members. I'll be brief. For the record, John Kelly, Director of Government Affairs for the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs. While MDVA takes no position on this bill, I want to note for the record that psilocybin is classified as a Schedule I controlled substance under U.S. federal law and cannot be used in our state veterans' homes.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions or member discussion? Okay, Vice Chair Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for beginning the conversation on what I hope to be a really long and arduously researched conversation before enactment by the state of Minnesota. About 25 years ago, Minnesota service members and veterans were told that there was a wonder drug, and they called it a prescription wonder drug. They said it had a really low addiction potential. They said because of its 12-hour slow release, it was going to be, you had less than a 1% chance of being addicted to this drug, right? They said that because of that slow release, there was less potential for abuse, and it would provide you with 12 hours of relief. And they pushed it, and they pushed it, and they pushed it. And that was OxyContin. And members, I know countless service members and veterans who at one point in time struggled with the addiction of that drug. I spent an entire summer after college with my cousin as he was trying to break his addiction because the VA finally cut him off and said, enough's enough, you can't have this, so he couldn't find it anymore. And we spent the entire summer in his basement playing video games because that was all he could manage to do as he was breaking his addiction to this prescription wonder drug that was FDA approved, was not a Schedule I drug, and had been researched thoroughly. And we heard here today comments of great potential. It has the potential to benefit. It has this, it has that. And we're seeing that there's only 2 states in the entire country, Oregon and Colorado, that allow this type of a drug to be utilized widely. And I think that as a state, we owe it to our service members, we owe it to our veterans to ensure that we are not allowing another wonder prescription drug to come out onto our markets without a thorough vetting of this. I'm not standing here telling you today that I'm against this concept. I'm not saying that the doctors are wrong. What I'm saying is that I need more than just a potential for benefit before I'm gonna ever move off of the stand that says we cannot open this door. So I know that there's a lot of great research going on. We had someone here today who told me that they were working on research and they saw potential benefits. That's great. Once we know for sure that this is a good thing, that this is not the next wonder drug that will addict an entire generation of service members, then I'll be on board with it. But before then, I will always be a no on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Reimer.
Representative Feist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know anything about this, so I'm learning a lot. And, I think that this is a very thoughtful, methodical approach to trying to introduce a new treatment to patients in Minnesota. Change can be scary and hard, and I think in this place, it's very difficult to make decisions where we're like not absolutely sure that we know exactly what's going to happen as a result. But in medicine, we don't always know how every drug and therapy will impact every single person, and we can't. I was just thinking, the reason I raised my hand to talk is I was just thinking about the Alzheimer's medication that the FDA just approved, where we're really unclear if that's going to have a positive impact on patients, but they decided that they were willing to do it. So sometimes we have to trust the experts, and in this case, the Department of Health, to develop really thoughtful, clear criteria for when we can use this treatment. So I think that I'm comfortable with the fact that I don't know exactly how this will work for every single person before we take this approach, because clearly a lot of thought and time has gone into this. And so I support your bill. Thank you.
Representative Reimer.
Mr. Chair, if I can, and Representative Feist, thanks for the comments, along with Representative Olson as well. You know, it harkens back to, for me, just a few years ago under a Republican administration when we talked a lot in this legislature and throughout the country about right to try, right? So we're not cutting corners, but we're using experimental drugs and experimental treatments in order to save your life from an ailment, right? So the hope for this bill, and the reason that the time horizon is a little bit longer, is so that we can establish a program that gives veterans and other people suffering from PTSD and these mental conditions leading to suicide and other issues the right to try another therapeutic. When you talk about oxytocin was synthesized and commercialized in the 1960s. And I think the broader conversation we're having right now is that just because it is FDA approved, right? Just because it is a drug, you know, as we traditionally think about it, doesn't mean it's always the right solution, right? I think even beyond oxytocin now we're getting into a pretty severe opioid problem with our veteran community. And what this bill does is it again creates another off-ramp, another tool in our tool belt for the right to try another therapeutic that may work for a number of our veterans. You know, I think you heard a powerful testimony about someone's firsthand experience on how this changed their lives. I think that's worth paying attention to. I think the time horizon is reasonable, and that's what I can say about that. Thanks.
Representative Raybrower.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You kind of just said a lot of the things I was thinking about saying, so I'm just going to take a minute to thank the testifiers for coming today. Really appreciated hearing your information, your stories. It's great to hear directly from folks who have worked for and directly from therapists who are doing that, want to be able to do this work and help their clients. I myself have watched a number of documentaries on the research going on and seen, that there is effectiveness happening. And as far as we go to the OxyContin, it was very much a big pharma advertising the glorious, things about this medication, and honestly knowing that people were probably going to get hooked on it and not caring. So I feel like we're coming at this from a very different perspective of the groundwork of what is working for folks. And so I am excited to continue to hear more and learn more about the research, and just thank you for bringing it forward.
Representative,
Whatever. Mr. Chair, thank you. I just wanted to ask, I think we have Kelly from Office of Cannabis Management to come up and just speak about this bill and potential costs and implementation of it if possible.
Sure. Come to the table and give your name and begin your testimony.
Good morning, chair members. My name is Kelly Wilder, and I serve as the Government Relations Director for the Office of Cannabis Management. The office has appreciated engagement from the bill's advocates and from Representative Smith over the past few weeks. These are novel programs and remain rare nationwide, as some of you have mentioned, and OCM currently does not possess expertise in the therapeutic use of psilocybin. So should the bill move forward, we would appreciate the opportunity to continue to provide input on major structural components for the program, as well as input to ensure adequate timeline and resourcing. We were asked to work on a fiscal note for the original version of the bill. We have not had a request for the DE, and that fiscal note is not yet complete and released from the LBO, so I actually can't speak to specifics of the fiscal note today. I will say that it was robust, just considering the fact that, as I said, we do not currently have expertise in this area. So thank you, Chair and members. We look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right. Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Reimer, for bringing this forward. I find it very interesting, and I do support it, and I want to expand upon Representative Olson's comments, because I think he made some good ones. But what I took out of that, Representative Olson, is that just because the FDA approves something doesn't mean it's safe. And just because something's natural doesn't mean it's safe. We have to walk forward carefully either way. I do believe these natural substances, they're part of nature and not created, do not have a fair playing field in the medical realm because they're not moneymakers. And as Representative Rayrard kind of mentioned, it's something that we should explore carefully. And so I think this is good. I'm a little concerned with the timeline that some of your testifiers spoke about, because we want veterans to be able to have that option. I think informed consent is hugely important, whether it's FDA approved or natural. And so transparency and, these are the known side effects. These are the known, whether it's addictive or not addictive and so on. Super important. But I think this is a good bill that needs to walk forward carefully. But I would encourage that we don't put so many constraints upon it that it makes it almost impossible for a veteran to, with that knowledge, be able to take part in a study, because that's basically what this is. I do have one question about the veterans home comment that was made, where a veteran at a veterans home would not be able to utilize this substance. With the treatment, is it only given in a clinical place? I'm not sure the proper terms here. Or is it something you give that person the drug and they take it in their own home or and so on? I'm not sure if I'm asking that correctly.
Representative Reimer.
Mr. Chair, Representative Bennett. By the way, just the timeline on this, I never thought that I would be more conservative on this than Representative Bennett. We got a rebel over there. But no, so as part of this bill, there is approved medical facilities, and I'll let Representative Smith maybe fill in the details a little bit here, but it is also not self-administered. So my understanding, in a number of veteran circumstances, just because they don't take a specific drug in the veteran's home, my understanding is that there can be referrals out, and these would be approved medical facilities.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kelly would like to come up and make a comment.
Yeah.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair, Representative. So our residents in our state veterans homes, they are not going out to get this treatment. They are treated in the veterans home. We are funded 45% of our budget by the federal VA. The federal VA does not provide this treatment, and so we are not able to provide this treatment. We communicated this to Representative Smith and his staff in the interim. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Smith?
Yeah, I can answer that question as well. And that's exactly correct. Unfortunately, we are unable to change federal law to make that possible. I would love to, and have talked to some of our federal representatives about that, and there are some that are working on that. To the question, I think this gets to Representative Olson, some questions as well, and I was going to say this in my closing remarks, but what also brought me to this was things like Oxycontin and things that are addictive that are currently used to treat these, as well as SSRIs, which can also have very negative side effects, which is primarily what we have for treatment on depression, PTSD, several other things. Those are taken continually, usually daily, sometimes several times a day. And because of that, they're both unfortunately profitable for large insurance companies, which is why they are pushing these products. But secondarily, the individual has it in their possession. And so that's where you lead to understandable substance abuse for especially folks who are struggling with very intense mental health disabilities. This is a very different drug. So the science is very clear that psilocybin is not addictive, first of all, and second of all, it would only be something that someone took once or twice a year total. This program specifically is arranged to have the maximum amount of benefit while also not allowing any sort of abuse of the drug itself. So the way someone would take this drug, a veteran in this case, their mental health provider or physician or some licensed medical professional, and that could be someone that is in a veteran's home, could say, this is a possible treatment for you that is available to you in this state where you live. It wouldn't be covered, to be clear, by the VA, but it's something where they could recommend someone for this program. The commissioner could approve that, but there would have to be a health screener that individual would have to go to make sure there's nothing in their past that would potentially, in their medical past, that could potentially be complicated by psilocybin use. Then they would go to a licensed facility that are licensed through the Office of Cannabis Management, and the bill as it currently is. And they would have 3 sessions. The first would be an informative session to get informed consent, to be very clear about what they are taking, what the experience would be like, what the hope is going to be in the whole space of the program. Then they would leave. Then they would come back to that place again, the licensed facility, and they would have an administrative session. That's when they would actually take the drug and have the experience that normally lasts several hours in the presence, every single moment, of a licensed provider. And there are currently programs to license those caregivers in states, Oregon and Colorado specifically, that we could use those programs to license those individuals to make sure not only that those patients are safe, but they're also being coached through that very unique experience. And then when it was judged that it was safe for them to go, they would leave. Then they would come back for a 3rd session called an integrated session, which is to talk through that experience and make sure that it's integrated in their overall life and healing process. And then that individual would have a year in this program where if they felt that was a good experience, they could come back. Again, if all of those professionals, licensed professionals, think that that would be a helpful process. So I think it's helpful to kind of go through how an individual would actually go through that to help with these specific questions. They're great questions. So hopefully that was clarifying.
Any further questions? None? I do have some comments. I believe I co-signed on this bill. The studies I've read shows great promise. To Co-Chair Olson's remarks on Oxy, yeah, it was pushed out bad. It was prescribed bad. It is a wonderful drug when used properly. I recently had 3 joints replaced. I don't think I could have made it through without that. So, and again, I'm very careful when I take that drug and try to sometimes pull myself off a little too soon. And trust me, that's not a favorable experience. I do have a question. Why psilocybin and not something like ibogaine, or I'm sure there's other drugs? Is there something unique about psilocybin versus ibogaine? And the reason I bring up ibogaine, I'm sure you're all familiar with Marcus Luttrell, and if you're not, watch the movie Lone Survivor. He is an American hero, stuck behind enemy lines in Afghanistan for many, many, many days, many broken bones, shot. Very traumatic experience. Watch his entire SEAL team get killed, along with a SEAL team rescue team get killed. He went and got ibogaine treatment, and he is a huge supporter of that. He said it changed his life. So that's this stuff does have great promise. I like the fact that we're doing it in a very controlled environment. I do have concerns about licensing the facilities. I'd like to see a licensed medical facility. I'd like to see the licensing requirements on that. I don't want to see it just a shop down on Hennepin. And forgive me if I'm using Hennepin in a derogatory way. Just when I grew up, that's what it was. And I just want to make sure that they're licensed, clean medical facilities for these people. I also want to make it clear I do not support the legalization of these products for recreational use. Under a controlled environment, I think they're very valuable. And with that, I'll leave the closing remarks to you guys.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first? Do you want to finish off?
I'll let Representative Smith make the closing remarks, but yeah, I think too, I'm trying to remember I would have similar concerns, Chair Bliss, with you about the total kind of free-for-all. I think that we've actually seen problems with that, like in the cannabis part of the world, like being e-commerce. I think that rollout has been a little bit clunky. But yeah, I can't address the specific mushroom type. I don't have a lot of experience personally with those products, but I do believe in the general outlet that we're potentially creating here for our veterans. So I'll turn it over to Representative Smith here shortly. I want to thank you all for your time and your consideration on this bill, and I really do hope it's a conversation we can keep open. I also just wanted to thank you for taking the bill. I think the application of this bill is really important for veterans. I wanted this bill to start here for this reason, and I'm sure, you know, the way the internet works, you'll start to see more stories pop up about this in your news feeds over time just because your phones are listening to this committee right now. So wanted to thank you all again for taking the time, and I'll turn it over to my my co-author.
Representative Smith.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chairs Bliss and Jong, for hearing this bill. I'll get some of your questions, and I really appreciate your statements on this bill, Chair Bliss. First of all, for ibogaine and other psychedelics such as LSD, MDMA, that have incredible potential and also are being studied currently to help. They are, since they are synthetic, they are created in a lab, which are currently, almost all of our labs are licensed federally. And so since it is federally Schedule I, it is very difficult to, outside of a research project, or able to get that to patients in a regular setting. And that's why we chose this. The reason that psilocybin was so attractive is because it grows naturally. It's literally mushrooms out of the ground that we can cultivate. We know how to cultivate them safely. We know how to test them, make sure that they're able to be ingested. We know how many grams of this particular psilocybin is in each mushroom. So that was really what attracted the research and specifically the task force to this being something that could get a supermajority of approval. And we can do that within Minnesota. So it also keeps us away from interstate commerce, which of course would get us into federal areas. So that's why we focused in on psilocybin. It was the best way that we could, as a state, argue to the federal government that we are doing this for our citizens within our own state. The second question as to facilities, one of the reasons that we gave OCM, who's going to be overseeing this, a lot of flexibility is learning from mistakes of the past. Oregon, when they passed their therapeutic program, had a huge list of requirements for these facilities, out of a desire, as we both have, for this to be safe. But in the actual world, how that turned out is that there was no place that actually could meet all of the standards that they actually put in the law, which obviously, once it's law, can't be changed. So there's some comical ones you can read about if you'd like, about like the thickness of the safe where the psilocybin would be in the evenings. And it was to such an extent that no areas could actually be open in Oregon. And we actually heard from the director of the Oregon program in our task force, and they recommended give some broad boundaries, as you said, Chair Bliss, to make sure it's safe, to make sure it's clean, make sure it's medical, these people are licensed, that everything is to top standard for the patients, but don't be so prescriptive that, you know, at the end of the day, after we do all this work, as Representative Bennett said, no one can access it because, you know, it's only in maybe one facility that's in Rochester because there's Mayo Clinic, or, you know, it's up in Duluth, and so people don't have access to it. So that's why we gave kind of a broad direction to OCM. I'm happy to talk about if that direction is enough or not enough in the bill. I think certainly that's something we would like. At the end of the day, this is not a Representative Reimer bill or Representative Smith bill. Really, this is for the people of Minnesota, including veterans, to be able to have access to something that can help them. In one of the biggest areas of concern we have in our society. And that's why I'm passionate about this. That's why I'm thankful for partnerships across the aisle and wherever we can find it, so people can get the help that they need to live the lives they want to lead, and especially those who have given such a service to our country. So thank you, chairs.
Thank you. House File 4577 as amended is laid over. Thank you, gentlemen.
Smith moves to amend Senate File Number 4612, the third and gross one as amended. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. So this amendment will be establishing a therapeutic psilocybin program here in Minnesota. Psilocybin has shown through a lot of wonderful research an incredible ability to help those who are struggling with a wide variety of mental health concerns, from depression to addiction recovery, as well as PTSD, especially in veterans or public safety officers, those who have experienced a traumatic event, as well as assault survivors. So a lot of really good things to do. This program is a very conservative, slow entrance into this new area of psychedelic medicine with a pilot program that no more than 1,000 Minnesotans over the first 3 years will be a part of. And we're very, very careful to make sure that the right people get this and that there's the right information being gathered. A physician has to recommend them to the program. They go through a health screening, and there are 3 separate sessions that take place through the course of the treatment. The first one, you don't even receive any treatment. You're talking through it. The third one, you actually receive it with someone in the room who is licensed. And in that third and final time, you integrate your experience into the healing process. I think this is a really, really great program. I'm happy to answer questions on it on the floor, and thank you generally for the nature of this here. I really appreciate it.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative Reimer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Thank you, Representative Smith. This has been a labor of love between him and I. It's been, yeah, it did sound a little bit weird. Sorry about that. I mean, listen, we could hug after this. I don't know. This is a really good pilot program, and it's buoyed by the fact that the Trump administration came out and said that there's a new openness to programs like this, and part of the bill instructs the department to go after potentially part of the $50 million that the Trump administration had said to kind of help fund and explore this program. So I want to just echo a lot of what Representative Smith said. It's a very careful entry into this. A lot of the testimony that was heard in both the Health Committee and the Veterans Committee, you saw some really good outcomes. And the way that I look at this amendment is it creates an off-ramp for people to not get hooked necessarily into drugs on an ongoing basis, but actually use a therapeutic like this to almost rewire their brain. The testimony that we heard firsthand from especially a lot of our veterans were that this was life-changing. So members, I think this might be one of not the most consequential, but the second most consequential thing you vote on today, because I really view this amendment as something that is life-changing and life-saving, and I ask for a green vote. Thank you.
Further discussion, I recognize the member from Beltrami, Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's probably the first time you're ever going to, and probably the last time you'll ever hear me quote Shakespeare on this floor. But politics make strange bedfellows, and that I don't think I could have ever thought of signing on to a bill, like this. But, in Minnesota, we lose 200 veterans a year to PTSD. That was a personal number for me a couple of years ago, January 1st, 2023. Yep, lost a family member that day. We lose 22 veterans a day nationally to PTSD. And it's funny, that number, I remember coming here and seeing 22 veterans boots, or 22 pairs of boots on the front steps. I think that was 2017, my first year here, and that number hasn't changed, folks. We're not making any progress. Last year, we asked the MDVA to focus more on veteran suicide. And they've done a great job with the veterans homelessness, and we're almost at functional zero there. We asked them to look more into veteran suicide. And for those of you who watched the movies or read the book Lone Survivor, I would recommend the book over the movie. Marcus Luttrell was a Navy SEAL his team was ambushed in Afghanistan. Long story, but he was a very, very traumatic experience. He went through this treatment similar to this. It's on President Trump's executive order. He listed off 3 or 4 different psychedelics, and ibogaine is the one that Marcus Luttrell got. And he stated that one treatment changed his life. One treatment. He was going through severe PTSD, and you know that there was a 2024 Stanford study on special operations veterans. They did this study, and I'm quoting what the results were: dramatic, rapid, and sustained reduction of PTSD symptoms. There was also significant improvements in anxiety, depression, and cognitive function. 88% expressed reduction in symptoms after one treatment. 88%. 86% of the patients were still in remission from their PTSD symptoms 1 year after the first treatment. Members, if that was cancer treatment and a drug, we would have no questions on this. I think there's a little bit of hesitancy because of the magic mushroom stigma we're getting here. This is not legalizing mushrooms. I would be voting against that. This is a clinical trial funded through the federal government to help people with PTSD and severe depression. The PTSD, I've been doing some research since 2023. There's actually a physical change in your brain, the way that your brain functions, and they can measure it on brain scans and measuring the neural transmissions up there. And this treatment, in that study, they did neuroimaging, and it showed that the brain, the high beta activity that changes the brain for the PTSD in the soldiers was dramatically reduced. So a physical change. And I just want to end my statements. The lead researcher gave a statement. He said, "No other drug has ever been able to alleviate the functional neuropsychiatric symptoms of traumatic brain injury. The results are dramatic, and we intend to study this further." Members, this is important. We've got to do this. Please vote green. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize a member from Clay, Representative Keeler.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Representative Smith for bringing this. I sat in the Health Committee when you brought this bill, and the testifiers that we had as the daughter and the granddaughter of a veteran, this is really solving a really big issue. I think it's important that we think outside of the box. I also just want to say I've been talking about this bill a lot in greater Minnesota and in rural Minnesota. And there's this stigma that sometimes we don't know what we can say or not say, or if people are going to love it or hate it. And the truth is everywhere I went and talked about it, people are really, really excited that we're doing this. People see this as a way to kind of move around some of the pre-authorizations that we have found utilizing other medications. And you're right, it's not like we're not adding mushrooms to a recreation. This is actual healthcare. This is mental health support, and this will save lives. And so I just wanted to say I'm really excited. I said that on the record before. I know Australia and Canada are really doing amazing things, and I think we can be a leader to do this. So thank you for the work you've done. Thank you for doing this in a really bipartisan way. I think we're doing some amazing work for our veterans. Opida.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Smith, for bringing this amendment. It is a very good amendment, and most of the important bits have already been said, particularly what Representative Bliss brought up about the efficacy of PTSD treatment in relation to psychedelics. One thing I want to address is some might say, well, this seems really fast. Maybe we should not adopt it in this way. We should slow it down. One of the biggest reasons to do this today is the $50 billion available from the federal government. Many states are in no way ready to utilize that money. So by being early, we can have a program that will help many people with severe conditions, and we'll have it paid for by the federal government. That money is going to be spent. It might as well be spent benefiting Minnesotans. So I'd urge members to support this amendment And I think it sends a very good message if you talk to a lot of veterans or really anybody who has had this experience in this space on how it's helped them. It's a unique intervention that fundamentally improves brain function and can address things unlike anything we've seen. And the evidence just keeps coming in. And like Representative Bliss said, we're seeing numbers, efficacy numbers, that are just unreal. It's incredible what's been advanced in just a few years. So thank you, Representative Smith, thank you, Representative Reimer, and Representative Bliss for moving this forward down the field. I think all members should feel very comfortable with a green vote on this bill, this amendment. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would request a roll call.
All right, seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author of the amendment yield to a couple of questions?
He will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Smith, thanks for the prior conversation, and a couple of other questions, mostly one. Why go through the Office of Cannabis Management versus the Department of Health? And what does the Office of Cannabis Management know about kind of instituting a study like this?
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Thank you, Speaker. That's a great question. So, because we had these discussions, the initial version of this bill, if you go back to some of the other engrossments, did have the Department of Health much more involved. So, from a practical level, just to be frank, the Department of Health didn't feel that they had the expertise in this particular area to oversee this sort of program as we were designing it. And that's when the Office of Cannabis Management came in and started discussing it with us, much because, like cannabis, it is a naturally grown and occurred plant, right? Mushrooms can be grown from the ground. So they had experience in licensing things that were Schedule 1 from a federal perspective, but grown in state. So we stay away from the interstate commerce clause, licensing those facilities, and then also licensing those who took the actual drug and actually administered it. So though this particular drug is very, very different in how it works in the body than cannabis and even what the treatment is, the actual steps of getting it to patients in a way that we thought was best, the Office of Cannabis Management, going back to when they were working in the medical cannabis area, felt that they had the expertise for this particular program.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that answer. And so, so just walk us through, I think I understand that this is overseen by a physician or a psychologist, psychiatrist. I know there are several steps to it, but I know that that person that undergoes this treatment is not in a room alone somewhere. Can you tell us what that might look like a little bit for the record? Thank you.
He will continue to yield. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you for that question. So we'll just go from the beginning. Someone feels that they're suffering from PTSD, and they hear us talking about it on the floor, and so when this goes into effect, they will go to their physician and mention this, or potentially a physician could recommend this to a patient they think has a qualifying medical condition, which will be defined in the rulemaking process. If this is something that the physician thinks is helpful to the patient and the patient wants to undergo, they will go through a health screening process to make sure there's no underlying health conditions that might conflict based on studies with the treatment itself. So just as an example, a history of psychosis would be something that most likely through the rulemaking process, we wouldn't want someone on this particular treatment. Once they pass that screener, they will then be referred to a licensed facility. In that licensed facility, they will undergo 3 separate sessions, and each of those sessions will take place with a licensed individual. We don't specify the particular program for the licensure of those candidates. However, we do recommend that the department, or I guess in this case the office, take into account already existing licensure processes in places that have them, which is mainly right now Colorado, New Mexico, and Oregon. So that those courses, those sort of things are already available. We're not building from scratch, so to speak. Getting back to the individual, they will have one basically administrative session where they will receive a full description of the treatment itself, what it's about, give informed consent to actually going forward on this. But then they will go home and they will be scheduled another time to come back to that licensed facility for the actual administration of the drug, or I might say the treatment itself, for a full session. Again, they will always be in the room with someone who is licensed to guide them through that process. And that looks very different depending on the individual. There's some really interesting studies that you can find. And then after that, and that licensed individual believes that it is safe for them to go home, there's no more impairment because of the treatment, they will go home, and then they will come back for a third, what's called an integration session in the bill, in which they will talk about the experience, and that licensed individual will again try to connect the experience to the overall healing process, decide if it's something maybe that they should do again or to go back to the physician, whatever the recommendation might be from there. They're also licensed for just 1 year within the program. So if they want to renew, they will have to go back to the department to get a renewal.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Smith, for that explanation.
Further discussion. I recognize a member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious if the author would yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Gilman.
Wonderful. So I'm looking at section 6. We had a nice conversation about location and facilitator locations. Again, it does mention private residences where we had a conversation about when patients would be not able to leave their home in order to have their treatment. So I was just wondering, as this moves through the process, would you be willing to define that more in statute so there'd be real clear guardrails around that? Again, grateful for this piece of legislation that's been brought forward. Just wondering if you've also modeled this around any other state in the nation that's already doing this.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative Gilman. I really appreciate our conversations about this particularly, because the intent is certainly not that people will be taking this in their homes, certainly not by themselves. The reason we put this language into the bill is really an accessibility question, particularly in two fields that this drug has shown potential for. One is veterans, for example, if they are in a veterans facility that they don't want to leave or for some other reason want to have that there. And it will be an approved private residence. I think that's a key wording there. They're approved. It will have to be approved by the Office of Cannabis Management based on rulemaking, as you mentioned, that we will probably take from places like, again, the three kind of at the forefront, now four if we pass this today, will be Oregon, Colorado, and New Mexico. But certainly through the rulemaking process, we want to make sure that that is not the case. The other big group that would really benefit from this are those in our broader disabled community who may want a part of this but will not be able to either go for any particular reason to these sites that are licensed themselves. So that's why we put this language in here, and I absolutely will commit to making sure that your worries are not foregone.
Representative Gilman.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and thank you for your words on this. And again, I just want to personally thank Joe Rogan on the Minnesota House floor, that he had President Trump's ear and was willing to bring stories, again, of folks that have suffered and those that have died from PTSD and other traumatic brain injuries. This medicine, natural medicine, does create new neural pathways and a new opportunity for families across the state of Minnesota to help with healing. And I am grateful that this has come forward. I'll be excited to see how the finished product will look here. Yeah, excited that we will have an opportunity to capture, millions of dollars to help in helping families heal across the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the amendment? I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Bierman.
I just wanted to weigh in as well. I've heard a lot about this. We had the committee hearing, of course, so it's gone through a committee. Appreciate all the good conversation members have had. I've met a few people who have tried this, and the word they use is transformational. So I think there's a lot of promise in it, and encourage a yes vote.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. I do have a thank you section. I didn't have Joe Rogan on there, but might as well say thank you to Joe Rogan as well. If you want to have me on the podcast, feel free. But in actuality, I do want to say thank you to a lot of partners in this room that have helped across the partisan divide on this. Going back to 2023, where we were careful as a state and responsible. We had a task force. Representative West served on that with me, representing the House. Representative Hudson was on that bill with me. I think Representative Inget as well. So it has been great to work in this space. Representative Reimer, thank you especially for pushing these last couple of weeks. And if you were in the Health Committee or in the Veterans Committee, you got to hear some of these amazing stories. And I would recommend, if you weren't able to, if you don't serve on those committees or haven't seen the videos, to go back and watch them. We are doing something really incredible today. There are 1,000 Minnesotans right now who feel lost, who feel like potentially that their life is over, that they can't function. And probably not all 1,000 will find this drug helpful, but a lot of them will. And it will lead them to a better life than they thought is possible right now as we are voting on this bill. So thank you all. That is what this bill is about, and I really appreciate the support today.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely. Baker.
Go ahead, Dave.
Baker votes aye.
Baker votes aye. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, aye.
Momani Hildsley votes aye. Schultz.
Schultz, aye.
Schultz votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 114 yeas and 15 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the...
Okay, members, next up is Senate File 4204, Senator Umu Verbeten's bill. It is being passed out. Members, this is the first committee stop. The intention is to lay the bill over. After our discussion of it, there is an A4 amendment, which would be in the nature of an author's amendment. Senator Umu Verbeten moves adoption of the A4 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Senator Umu Verbeten, tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Senate File 4204 removes the criminal penalties for the personal use and possession of psilocybin. This is one of 3 recommendations from the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force. I'll note that there are other recommendations from the task force that I certainly support, and they are traveling in other bills, but the bill that we have before us today is really specific to the one recommendation on removing criminal penalties, very much within our committee's jurisdiction. I think it's an important conversation for us to start here in Judiciary and Public Safety. Just to give a little background on psilocybin, it is naturally found in fungi throughout the world. It has been used in indigenous cultures worldwide for thousands of years as a part of religious and therapeutic practices.
and it has been used safely by the broader population in the US since the 1950s. It's not addictive, non-toxic, and there's not a known lethal dose. Psilocybin is showing incredible promise as a treatment for many mental health conditions, yet it remains inaccessible because of its status as a Schedule I drug. We know that people are accessing psilocybin mushrooms already in increasing numbers as their therapeutic potential becomes more visible to the mainstream. So what this bill does is it removes those criminal penalties for use and possession. The author's amendment that we had does remove any mentions of cultivation, which were in the bill as introduced. And that's really, again, just to mirror the specific recommendation from the task force. This bill also establishes a psychedelic medicine board that would be responsible for establishing that possession limit for psilocybin. And both the American Medical Association and Minnesota Medical Association do endorse removing criminal penalties for possession and use. I want to note, we've also seen in certain municipalities, they have deprioritized enforcement of drug laws for natural psychedelics like psilocybin and have done so without incident. So with me here today is Dr. Jessica Nielsen, who is the chair of the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force and is an expert in medical use of psilocybin and can share more about the task force and the bill today.
Dr. Nielsen, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Chair and distinguished members of the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Dr. Jessica Nielsen, and I'm testifying in support of SF 4204 as amended to remove criminal penalties for psilocybin-containing mushrooms. I was appointed by Governor Walz in 2023 and elected to serve as the chair of the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force based on my extensive experience doing psychedelic clinical research here in Minnesota, where I conducted the first FDA and DEA-approved research psilocybin clinical trial in the state. The task force submitted our 200-page legislative report last year with recommendations that included removing criminal penalties for use and possession of psilocybin mushrooms. The report thoroughly evaluated their long history of use by indigenous cultures worldwide, scientific evidence for their safe and effective therapeutic uses across a broad range of difficult-to-treat mental health conditions, the expansion of access in other states and countries who have legalized regulated access models to fill the gap in currently available treatment options, and policy considerations for implementation of our recommendations. Psilocybin mushrooms are widely used among the general population, where people often seek them out from underground sources and put themselves at legal risks for the opportunity to experience the profound effects and potential healing uses. Removing criminal penalties around possession and use is a recommendation by both the American Medical Association and the Minnesota Medical Association that all drug use and possession should not have criminal penalties associated with them, as problematic substance use is a health issue, not a criminal one. Colorado has removed criminal penalties for naturally derived psychedelics like psilocybin mushrooms, and dozens of municipalities, as Senator Umer Verbatim mentioned, around the country have also done so, including right here in Minneapolis in 2023 through an executive order signed by the mayor without negatively impacting public safety around possession and use. While the legislature considers other bills on the recommendations of the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force to implement the Therapeutic Access Program for psilocybin mushrooms, I strongly encourage that this recommendation being considered here to remove criminal penalties for psilocybin mushrooms also be approved. I do want to direct your attention to the additional letters of support and written testimony by 24 other people, in addition to myself, all in favor of this bill, including physicians, mental health therapists, and other people that have been using psilocybin on their own. Thank you for your time and consideration of this important piece of legislation to help ease the suffering of all Minnesotans.
Thank you, Dr. Nielsen, for your testimony, and members, in your packet, there are all of those letters that were referred to by the testifier. We also have Curtis Hanna who's signed up to testify. If you wish to do so, or just available to answer questions, whatever you'd like. Okay, so Mr. Hanna will be available if there are any questions. So open it up for discussion from members of the committee. Senator Limmer.
Thank you. Senator Umer Verbatim, has the pharmaceutical board weighed in on this bill by any chance?
Senator Umer Verbatim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Limmer. I don't believe they have. I was going to defer to Dr. Jessica Nielsen as well.
Dr. Nielsen.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Senator Limmer. So we met with the Licensing Board and the Board of Pharmacy in relation to the other legislation being passed for the recommendation for a therapeutic access program. The notion here to remove criminal penalties doesn't have any kind of bearing on whether anybody could prescribe these. It really is just asking people not to enforce a federal law, which doesn't really bleed into any kind of prescribing practices or anything that the Board of Pharmacy would have jurisdiction over.
So, Mr. Chair, does that mean that the Pharmaceutical Board has no opinion on this legislation?
They have
So
thoughts.
Dr. Nielsen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you,
It's okay.
Chair.
We just need to, for the public record, we need to identify the speakers. That's all.
Appreciate it. Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Chair. And thank you, Senator Limmer. So they haven't weighed in specifically on this bill. As I mentioned, they've only weighed in on the therapeutic access program because that involves administration by people that have various types of licenses, whether it's a health license for being a mental health provider or a prescriber's license, whether they're a physician or a nurse practitioner. Because this is a Schedule I drug, it's not something that can be prescribed, so it's really not under the purview of the Board of Pharmacy because Schedule I drugs are only allowed to be administered in the context of clinical trials with a DEA license for research. But when it comes to access programs like this, for the other health program, it really is kind of more of a recommendation similar to the medical cannabis program, or any prescriber is not really allowed to, so it's not really something the Board of Pharmacy is able to have any input on because it is a Schedule I drug.
Okay. And Mr. Chair,
Senator Limmer.
Senator Baden on the Medicine Board described on page 6, the membership seems incomplete based on line 6.7, 6.10. How many members would fit into line 6.7 and 6.10 did one have in mind?
Senator Baden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Limmer. It certainly is incomplete. I think what we have here today is the start of a framework that we're hoping to build out. One of the questions in this bill is what the possession limit would be, and I feel like it would be best determined by those experts, and hopefully a continuation of some of the folks who have been a part of the psychedelic medicine task force. So this is one potential way to pursue that, creating a medicine board that would include a number of those folks who served on the task force. Those specific details will need to continue to flesh out, but this is sort of the beginning of a framework that we're hoping to develop.
Mr. Chair, I would be concerned about balance in membership. There doesn't seem to be that with an unlimited number of public members could be appointed by the governor, and nor is there any defining element to who they may be. Are there certain people from a therapeutic community versus people who are perhaps just users? We wouldn't want to have a psychedelic medicine board to be 80% in favor of unbridled use of this product. And so I would be anxious to see a little more balance in the membership. Mr. Chair, what's the intention of the committee on this bill?
To lay the bill over, so.
Okay, and then could you explain what the action for damages, how that would apply in a case for is that just restricted to the personal adult use, or is that more for the application of the Psychedelic Medicine Board?
Senator Limmer, that provision was deleted by the A4 amendment.
Oh, it was, okay, thank you. And no further questions at this time.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Baden.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Senator Limmer, and I thought it might be helpful just to hear a little bit more about the membership of the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force, where I think we did achieve more of that balance. The recommendations received, I think, a 2/3 majority, but there was really good discussion in that task force, and Dr. Nielsen can talk a little bit more about that.
Dr. Nielsen.
Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Limmer. So for the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force, the appointments were made were half from the state, so from state agencies, the Governor's Office, the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Health, the Department of Commerce, and then there was another set. So there was 23 members total on the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force, and then the rest were publicly appointed. So these were volunteers from the public. This included a psychiatrist, a clinical psychologist, an addiction medicine specialist, 2 veterans with treatment-resistant mental health conditions, 2 patients with treatment-resistant mental health conditions, a public health policy expert, and then we had members of the legislature represented. So we had a pretty good bipartisan representative group of people that were kind of talking about these issues from multiple perspectives, from public safety, from a legal standpoint, from lived experience, from the unmet medical need from patients, from providers who were frustrated. And so the idea is to have kind of a pared down version of that for this board to really advise on all these complicated topics for how people can engage with this safely. Thank you.
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Verbatim, for bringing this bill. Treatment-resistant depression is a devastating illness, devastating. Treatment by medication is a grueling process where different medications are, it's a trial and error system, and medications can take weeks or months to reach their full effect. When you have tried and failed 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of medications, in my experience, the patient is left in such a state of despair. And I am grateful that alternative therapies are starting to emerge to address this very real problem. Some estimates say that 30% of all people with depression experience treatment-resistant depression. Some say it's as high as 50%. Medication and psychotherapy, talk therapy, do not always provide the answer to folks with depression. I know I am encouraged by ketamine therapy. We've seen great results there. I don't know if folks know, but ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, remains the gold standard when it comes to treatment-resistant depression. But that treatment has a stigma attached to it. If you watch, even watching TV and movies, the shock treatment is always portrayed as some sort of mind-altering, barbaric, cruel treatment that's provided to folks similar to the lobotomies of the 30s and 40s and 50s. And that's not it at all. And that stigma makes it even more difficult for folks to go in and get the treatment that they need when folks can see real improvements through ECT treatment. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful we're having this conversation. I'm grateful for the studies that have gone into this particular treatment. I will be a yes on this bill while we're laying it over. If we were voting, I'd be a yes. But I think it's important that we continue to move forward, recognizing the importance of these treatments and the benefits they can do to members of our community. Thanks.
Senator Verbatim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate your comments, Senator Seeberger, and it is really heartbreaking to see the way people have struggled to the treatments that are available. And, you know, I talked about in my opening statement how this has been used by cultures and communities for years, right? For thousands of years as a therapeutic practice. And there are other recommendations, and again, I wanted to kind of focus our conversation on removing criminal penalties today, but those other recommendations are so important to look at a therapy pilot, to make sure there's more resources for research on other, you know, psychedelic medicine that can really help people who are struggling with mental health conditions. So grateful for your support.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when I've been approached on this bill, it's under the guise of medicinal or therapeutic purposes, and heard a lot about that today. But just so we're understanding the bill that's in front of us, this is decriminalizing recreational use of psychedelics, right?
Senator Verbatim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Kroon, the bill does remove the criminal penalties specifically for use and possession of psilocybin.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that's certainly interesting. I also noticed that minors under the offenses section would be guilty only of a petty misdemeanor and not to be fined more than $100. So I guess if we catch a minor with LSD, it's less of a serious offense than if we catch him with a beer.
Senator Mover Bett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Kroon. I think the goal with this bill really is to follow the guidance from our medical associations to remove penalties, right, for drug use. And then in those situations where we definitely don't want those minors accessing this, I think we'd want to see a substance abuse approach and a public health approach to those situations rather than criminalizing folks. Yeah, and Dr. Nielsen wants to add something.
Dr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Senator Kern. So the idea around the use here is really about personal possessions amount. It's not a lot, it's not asking, and I wouldn't really call it recreational use. The way that these psychedelic mushrooms are used are really more kind of ritualistic, ceremonial, and therapeutic. They're not really fun experiences. The way that they're used in the therapeutic context, they bring up a lot of really difficult material. And to the point of like whether youth are going to be able to have access to them and what the associated penalties are, I mean, I think if you contrast that to alcohol and other substances that kids have access to, this is far less dangerous and less likely that this is something that kids are using. And we're talking about psilocybin mushrooms, not LSD. That's a completely different substance that the task force did review, but we ultimately didn't move forward on a recommendation because it's a synthetic that we can't easily grow. And that doesn't have the long history of safe use in the world.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The same concept applies for psychedelic mushrooms. Substitute that for LSD. It's a petty misdemeanor for a minor, whereas a beer is at least a misdemeanor, in my understanding, where you have to actually go to court. It seems like when people go around here selling this as medicinal and therapeutic, then that's what the bill should say, and not when you see it, be like, oh, this is we're just decriminalizing it. That's a pretty gigantic step to take on this. But I guess that's just this bill. And if we are going to decriminalize these psychedelics, and I'll say for recreational purposes, despite what your characterization is, because that's accurate. You certainly need to do a whole lot more work than this, and there probably should be several steps in between, starting with having it be done for medicinal purposes under doctors' supervision and all that kind of stuff would seem to me the responsible way to do this.
Chair.
Dr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Kroon. So I think I just do want to defer again to the recommendations of the Minnesota Medical Association and the American Medical Association that any type of problematic substance use that's not manufacturing, it's not drug trafficking, it's just simple use and possession really is more of a health concern that should be in the realm of public health officials and medical professionals and not law enforcement. Thank you.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to clarify here, because I too had a conversation with you in my office, and it was my understanding that the goal was to have a limited legalization for the purposes of medicinal testing. So the bill in front of us feels blunt to me. It feels like a misdirect. So the goal is complete legalization for anybody over the age of 21, and really no serious criminalization under that. Is that correct?
Senator Mover Bett.
Mr. Chair, Senator Holmstrom, again, this is really specific to one of the recommendations from the task force limiting this to just personal use and possession and removing the criminal penalties for that. That's why we want to establish a board, kind of a group of experts that would be looking at what that specific possession limit would be. But again, following that guidance that we don't want folks in possession to face criminal penalties. Dr. Nielsen.
Dr. Nielsen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Latz, and thank you, Senator Holstrom. So yes, I do want to acknowledge that we have had separate conversations about a different piece of legislation that's moving through independently of this. We were trying to get this bill amended to include the therapy, so that could move through in the Senate, but we wanted to keep it focused, I think, for the purpose of this committee, to just the removing criminal penalties, which again was one of the recommendations of the task force that's independent of the therapeutic pilot program, which is moving through on its own, and they're not to be confused. So there was some attempt initially to kind of have that be heard here today, but that did not happen, so.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's two more points of this bill I want to get into. First of all is cultivation. I see that we can cultivate in the primary residence. I don't know anything about growing mushrooms,
Just FYI, Senator Holmstrom, sorry to interrupt you. That provision was removed in the amendment that was adopted at the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then we'll skip it. We'll move on. I don't know how you'd acquire it if you can't cultivate it legally, but that could be maybe a question as we continue with this bill. Motor vehicle use. So is there a roadside test similar to some sort of how we do with alcohol, where you blow into a device to determine if somebody is using? Is there something they can do other than just a standard? I have no idea how these work either. Forgive me, I don't often find myself in possession or use of these or ever. So is there a way that a police officer can know for certain that somebody is under the influence when he pulls them over?
Mr. Hanna, go ahead and introduce yourself and your affiliation and then answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Curtis Hanna. I'm the board president of the Psychedelic Access Project. And it's my understanding that right now, similar to cannabis, that the state utilizes drug recognition experts in order to determine impairment. I don't believe that there is any type of breathalyzer for psilocybin. However, I think that there's attempts being made right now to utilize saliva tests. And I do know for a fact that there is the ability to do blood tests to determine whether someone has used psilocybin within the last 24 hours.
Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And is the ability to test the blood work, is that something that's readily available? Every department could get access to it quickly so that they could actually implement and prosecute under these new terms?
Mr. Hanna.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I do not know the answer to that. However, I believe that testing for psilocybin is a fairly common thing that in just regular drug tests, like when you go to try to get a job, they test to see what substances are in your system, and psilocybin is one that is commonly checked. So I believe that law enforcement has this same test, but I don't know the firm answer on that.
So, Senator Holmstrom, every law enforcement agency, in fact, I think probably every squad car has a blood test collection kit in their trunk, which they can use for any impaired driving follow-up investigation. They don't actually insert the needle themselves. They take the suspect to a hospital where a person who's authorized under the statute can draw blood. It gets sealed, put in the kit, and then transmitted to the BCA or another accredited lab for evaluation. But it's quite common for alcohol and for other drug or substance, impaired substance concerns as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that clarification.
Chair.
Dr. Nielsen, to that point.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have just one additional clarification. So I think similar to testing for cannabis, it's really hard to determine the exact point of intoxication when it comes to these types of blood tests, unlike alcohol, where you can tell somebody based on their blood alcohol content that they are actively intoxicated versus they've just taken the substance within a few days of when the blood test was drawn. So I don't know that it's going to be completely accurate as a blood test that can be administered on site to say this person that's driving is currently intoxicated on this substance.
Yeah, there is no per se level for any controlled substance. With marijuana, there's a difference between the active ingredients and the inactive metabolites that are left over in the system for quite a long time. But they are working on, we've seen some testimony here with regard to pilot projects for saliva tests or portable screening tests. The BC, the state patrols have been working on that as well. But the DREs, or the drug recognition evaluators, are trained in testing individuals on a roadside and other places to determine if they appear to be impaired, substance to be determined by a follow-up test if they suspect someone is impaired. Council reminds me that it is a Schedule I substance, so under the current law, even a trace amount of it present in the blood would be considered a violation of our DWI statutes. Senator Holmstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's really the heart of my concern, is that similar to marijuana and federal laws, I worry that what's going to happen is somebody's going to recreationally use this and then find themselves in a heap of legal trouble because they decided to drive to the grocery store 2 days later. And have we gotten feedback from any organizations that do defense work for individuals with DUIs, or have any idea how to help people with this? Because it just feels like we're saying, hey, go do whatever you want, but then on the backside, we're going to be putting people in a lot of harm and a lot of problems.
Dr. Nielsen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Holmstrom. So I think the broader issue here is that people are already doing this pretty frequently, pretty widely in the population. And it's not really something that's causing a significant public health concern, not to say that that's not possible, but people aren't taking a bunch of mushrooms and driving. And if they are, that should be up to like the existing laws that exist for whether you're driving intoxicated or having substances in your system or on your person. I think when it comes to psilocybin mushrooms, it's really a distinct conversation because it's a fundamentally different substance. Like, not all drugs are created equal. Not all Schedule I drugs are the same. The reason why something's on Schedule I, from my perspective as a scientist, is really not evidence-based. But the work that it takes to get it off Schedule I is a whole 30-year process through clinical trials and scientific research. And that process doesn't necessarily reflect what's actually already happening in the community. So the idea of removing criminal penalties allows people to do this safely without having to have additional risks. People are already doing this. This just removes the criminal penalties associated with it, recognizing that it is by and large not nearly as dangerous to the public as things like alcohol, which are already widely available.
Just FYI, apparently today, the DWI task force is considering the other bill involving medical use. So it is a topic of conversation. The DWI task force is not just defense lawyers, it's actually a small portion of it is defense lawyers. Most of it are prosecuting attorneys, law enforcement, other probation officers, others that are involved in this space. Senator Holmstrom, follow up.
Last follow-up on that. So something you had said was that, this is already happening, but certainly when government decides to be permissive about something and actually legalize it, we're going to see more of it happening. We saw that with cannabis. We've seen it with everything. So the concern is, once again, if somebody was not willing to break the law and use this, and now they might be willing to do so, they might not understand all of the long-term effects and what that'll have to do with their other rights in society and their other abilities, and they may find themselves in trouble. That's what I'm trying to get to the heart of.
Senator Westland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Umuber-Baton. I know that the Section 8 was removed in the A4 amendment, and just going forward, I would have any concerns if any language were adopted regarding the custody visiting parenting time. This actually, and again, I know this has been removed, but just moving forward as we're having the conversations, this actually would have created a different standard for best interest analysis and endangerment than what is currently included in the family law statutes. There is an endangerment standard that is used to determine whether or not there should be a restriction on parenting time. So I would just, if this comes up again, I'm happy to have conversations around that, but I appreciate the fact that that piece was removed.
All right, I'm not seeing any further discussion from members of the committee. Senator Umuber-Baton, any closing comments before we lay the bill on the table?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it was helpful to gather feedback from the committee today. I appreciate your comments, Senator Westland. It's definitely something we'll look at as we continue to work on the bill. And again, there's a number of recommendations coming from that task force. This was really one specific piece that felt important to discuss in this committee today. But I am supportive of all those recommendations and look forward to working with folks on getting that language correct and hopefully ensuring people have access to this therapeutic medicine.
All right, with that said, the Senate File 4204 is laid over.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'd like to move the A100 amendment.
Senator Coran offers the A100 amendment. The Secretary will report the A100 amendment.
Senator Coran moves to amend Senate File number 4612 as follows. Page 264, after line 18, insert. This is the A100 amendment.
Senator Coran, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. What this amendment does is really starts to look at and at least identifies opportunities as it relates to natural medicine. We have a medicinal cannabis program today, for which I'm a big supporter of. What this is around the psilocybin mushrooms, if you want to say, but psilocybin. And what this one does is it looks really to expand on all the health conditions and the opportunities that this medicine has proven, or at least shown, to treat a wide variety of substances, substance use disorder, emerging evidence for PTSD, chronic pain, OCD, eating disorders. And with the movement at the Capitol, President Trump signed an executive order on April 8th to expand in access to psilocybin or psychedelic medicines, expedite review of applications to the FDA and new drug approvals for synthetic pharmaceuticals of versions of psilocybin, and allowing $50 million to support state access programs that contribute to the state-federal partnership about real-world evidence to accept medical uses or accepted medical uses of psychedelics like psilocybin mushrooms. This bill would create a supervised medical program, not broad legalization, not recreational use, and not decriminalization. It would provide access to medical supply, which is tightly controlled to track and trace and tamper-proof packaging, only be accessible to registered patients and registered suppliers. Only Minnesota residents 21 and over would be allowed with an actual real physician making the prescription. All treatment sessions would be done under the supervision of licensed medical health professionals and with medical monitoring on site in case of emergencies. Doesn't involve a change in scope of practice for licensed health practitioners working within the program, but remains oversight for addressing complaints and enforcement of the penalties for appropriate, unethical, and illegal behavior. This is not a long-term commitment by the state, but it's really a 3-year program pilot program that will evaluate whether natural psilocybin mushrooms can help alleviate symptoms of qualifying health conditions without causing a broader issues to the public health and safety. While allowing those struggling with difficult to treat conditions, it would be really the right to try and promising new therapy in a supervised setting. The legislature would evaluate it after 3 years, and if passed, Minnesota would be the 4th state in the country to expand access to psilocybin through state regulated therapy. When we think about natural medicines and the great promise in the work that's been done so far with President Trump reclassifying cannabis, that research can move forward, which is wonderful. The psilocybin, I'm not for these synthetic forms of psilocybin, but in our state, the natural form of psilocybin. In addition to, there's a huge movement from ibogaine. Again, another psychedelic treatment, which has shown great promise, and has the state of Texas put forth $100 million to help move that medicine that through the FDA approval process. Those show great benefit. And so with that, Mr. President, I wanted to bring it up on the floor, and I will withdraw the amendment, but from a conversation perspective, I think it's well worth our time to consider before the final bell tolls on our last day that we consider and find a location for this. It doesn't require any funding. It would require us to apply for the existing funding at the federal level and participate in that program. And so with that, Mr. President, I will withdraw the A100. Thank you, everyone.
The A100 has been withdrawn. Senator Heisman.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have the A9 amendments.
A9 amendment is in the packets, and Senator Mohammed moves the A9 amendment. Could you explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this grows out of an initiative, I believe that is being jointly led by Senators Ummu and Coran, which grows out of a task force work on psychedelic drugs as medicine. This one particularly focused on psilocybin therapeutic use. And the short version is that following the signing of an executive order by the president, I think $50 million is being made available on either a competitive or first come, first serve grant basis for states to apply for, to take a look at whether or not establishing a therapeutic use program for psilocybin might be feasible and advisable. And so this would direct the Office of Cannabis Management to keep their eye out for the opportunity to apply for those funds through this mechanism that's described in the amendment. All right. All right. Thanks.
Discussion on the amendment. If not, all those, Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble. Why wouldn't this psilocybin go through the Board of Pharmacy rather than through the OCM?
Senator Dibble.
That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you. I think probably for the same reason. Well, I'll try to fashion a good answer. I think it's similar to medical cannabis in that it's still considered an illegal drug federally, and so with I don't know, is it on Schedule 1? Yes. Yeah, it's on Schedule 1. So similarly, I mean, cannabis is now Schedule 3, but for a long time was Schedule 1. So the ability to work through the more traditional structures that have been set up around these kinds of substances is inhibited. And so, pharmacists, medical doctors, et cetera, feel like there's some implication for their license. And so we create these kind of workarounds to access these kinds of substances in this way, that has potentially positive therapeutic benefits, but because of legal designations like scheduling, it's hard to do that.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's my understanding that the Board of Pharmacy regularly sees all kinds of drugs that are used for medical purposes, and if that's what we're talking about with psilocybin, it seems like a better fit than maybe the Office of Cannabis Management. because if I recall, and you were the author of the bill, Senator Dibble, so I'll defer to you on this, but when we passed medical cannabis, I thought that went through the Board of Pharmacy as well.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, no, I don't remember any engagement with the Board of Pharmacy. I remember an active attempt to actively distance because, you know, there are these, you know, these legalities that, you know, doctors and pharmacists, you know, so no one, for example, prescribes cannabis for that reason. We do have pharmacists who are on staff at the medical cannabis retail settings to advise, you know, so the mechanism that occurs now is a doctor can certify that a particular patient has a condition. That's something that happens over here. So then there's a list of qualifying conditions over here. So then that means that patient can now qualify to purchase and can enroll and become a registrant in the medical cannabis program. They can go to a retail outlet, talk to a pharmacist who is knowledgeable about the various formulations, et cetera, you know, and, you know, kind of what the use protocols look like and give advice. But there's still a shield, if you will, that protects them from violating their license. Doctors are shielded from violating the terms of their license. So it's kind of a workaround. And these, you know, these official entities, whether it's Board of Medical Practice, Board of Pharmacy, et cetera, they've really never wanted to get involved in what are still classified as federally illegal substances. Do you have anything to add?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I would also just note historically that when the THC hemp-derived products were first legalized, they initially were routed to the Board of Pharmacy for oversight and enforcement and implementation, and ultimately they moved to MDH and then subsequently to OCM. And so I think Senator Dibble's correct that some of the complications around licensed medical professionals handling what are otherwise illegal products creates complications for the board. And then I'd also just note, like, trend-wise across the country, as psilocybin programs are launching, many states are sort of embedding them in their cannabis offices and sort of a natural medicine office approach to products that are somewhat similar.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Dibble, was this provision heard in the Commerce Committee when the bill was there?
Senator Dibble.
Mr. Chair, I'm told it was not. This provision in and of itself, I think, is a more recent idea. The bill that was introduced was, you know, the bill that Senator Cran presented on the floor as an amendment that he then withdrew, which does set up the whole entire psilocybin program, and I don't think that was heard.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Dibble, was this heard in any of the health committees?
Senator Dibble.
Mr. Chair, do we know? I don't think so.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And was this, because it's a Schedule I drug, was this proposal heard by the Judiciary Committee?
Senator Pratt. Senator Dibble, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, maybe I can jump ahead if you're going to continue to ask. I don't think this bill is heard at all. So.
Further discussion, Senator Howell.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Dibble. I think this therapeutic program, these psychedelics offer great help for those of us that have dealt with PTSD. And I listened to a lot of tests. Once I heard it was going to be tested by the federal government and looked at there that, the ibogaine piece of this is really interesting to me. My concern is that those that I listened to testimony on that have gone through this program in Mexico because it wasn't available here, doesn't sound like it's a very nice treatment. In fact, they have explained that it's probably one of the scariest things that they've ever gone through in their life, but it did fix them. It rewired their head to where they now function. But with that, I truly believe that my concern is it didn't go through the normal path and go through these other committees that actually, that we just heard, have the jurisdiction of some of this, that should look at it. And we just had a couple of amendments that, because it wasn't heard in the committee where it probably should have been heard, we didn't adopt it. And I think this falls right in that line. Not to say I look at this as it should be. I like the idea going there. I just think it needs to be heard in those committees and set us up for success. Because I think this is going to really help a lot of us that have dealt with the PTSD problem and provide us a lot of treatment. But I'm a little bit worried that we're throwing this in without actually doing due diligence through the committee process and having it heard in the committees that actually have more jurisdiction and probably better expertise than we do. And I use expertise cautiously because you don't know my definition of an expert, so we'll go there. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Wickland.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I think this amendment came about because of recent actions, and I think Senator Dibble, you may have mentioned this, but I think what Senator Curran and Senator Verbaeten were hoping to do was to be able to examine if there are federal opportunities for some funding for a trial or a pilot program that we could investigate and have an opportunity to participate in that, because the task force or the task force had developed recommendations about doing a pilot program. Senator Verbaeten had worked quite diligently on the pilot program bill, and just, I think recently, most of the concerns that have been raised, to my knowledge, about the boards had raised some concerns about who the providers would be to participate in this pilot. Those things had been addressed, and so we ran out of time to be able to hear, because that didn't happen until after deadlines. So we didn't hear the bill in my committee, but I know discussions were going on about refining that language. This amendment, though, is not, authorizing the pilot. It's just to make sure that they can continue to look at these federal funding opportunities. And my reading of it, it would just be information that they could evaluate whether there were options for participation. But I don't think that we could move forward with anything unless a bill, gets passed to do that. So I think it seems like the opportunity that Senator Curran and Senator Verbaeten talked to me about was, since this federal funding is first come, first serve, it would be helpful if we could, have some kind of proposal available to move forward with. So that's all I know about it. So thank you.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
No. Chair's in doubt. All those in favor raise their hands. And those on screen, okay, you raise your hand too, okay. Let me. Those opposed? By a vote of 5-4, the motion does prevail.